In many parts of the world, January often sees brilliant fireworks welcoming the new year, and February holds similar festivities. However, by March, similar displays of pyrotechnics reappear, but this time in the Middle East. Yet these fireworks are actually missiles and drones. And of course, there are no celebrations taking place. This is war. This is a conflict that has spread across the Middle East, a region of vital strategic importance on the world map. It is also an area where conflicts never seem to truly end. As of now, it is estimated that about 11 countries and territories in this region have all been drawn into military attacks. However, when looking at the balance of power, the situation is quite unusual. On one side is Iran, a country that has been under embargo for nearly 5 decades. They have almost no diplomatic or trade relations with any other nation. According to Western media, Iran is depicted as an extremely impoverished nation, with an allegedly underdeveloped population. Meanwhile, on the opposite side is a coalition of other Middle Eastern nations. The countries mentioned include Israel, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, along with the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Iraq, Jordan, Cyprus, and notably, the United States. The United States is the world's leading military power, possessing overwhelming strength. However, one point needs to be clarified. Israel is currently the primary target. Iran has launched hundreds of missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, at military facilities, as well as administrative centers around Tel Aviv and various other areas. As for the remaining countries, up to this point, Iran's attacks have primarily focused on U.S. military bases. Perhaps he is operating right in the area they control. Furthermore, armed skirmishes have broken out in several other locations. According to some reports, local military organizations have taken advantage of the escalating situation to launch raids. Their targets are those deemed adversaries, typically the United States or Israel. However, as these figures have not been officially verified, we will not include them in this analysis. This leads to a dilemma. Why would a country under sanctions like Iran, with an economy facing many hurdles, be ready for a direct confrontation with the world's leading powers? Not only that, they also do not hesitate to challenge other nations within the region. We will dive deep into this story right now. Welcome. Please note that this content is edited based on data aggregated from various international sources. Therefore, if any details require adjustment, please leave a polite suggestion in the comments section. First of all, when observing the developments of the conflict, in the current situation, the 3 central players always mentioned are Iran, Israel, and the US. However, the connection between these parties has not always been in a state of fierce confrontation. In fact, prior to 1979, Iran and Israel maintained a relatively close cooperative relationship. These two nations even frequently shared the same perspective on many regional security issues. The situation only completely reversed following the 1979 Iranian Islamic Revolution. The new leadership in Tehran began to identify Israel as a strategic adversary that needed to be eliminated. Since that milestone, relations between the two sides have continuously escalated in a negative direction. At this moment, as aerial firepower begins to appear densely in the skies over the Middle East, 3 primary reasons are typically cited to explain the outbreak of this conflict. The leading factor is the nuclear arsenal, an extremely sensitive issue whenever Iran is discussed. Based on intelligence data and official statements from authorities in early March 2026, the preemptive strike campaign by the U.S.-Israeli alliance against Iran is identified as having begun on February 28, 2026. The United States dubbed this mobilization Operation Terrible Fury, while Israel called it Roaring Lion. Washington and Tel Aviv argued that Tehran's nuclear activities had reached the threshold of atomic weapons capability. The diplomatic negotiation process over the years has been consistently unstable. Talks would occasionally make small gains, only to fall back into a complete stalemate. Simultaneously, U.S. and Israeli intelligence concluded that Iran was nearing a breakthrough in nuclear technology. Israel is particularly concerned about this scenario, as a nuclear-armed Iran would be a direct threat to its existence. For years, leaders in Tehran have repeatedly issued hardline statements regarding the elimination of Israel's presence. Naturally, the Iranian government has presented arguments that are completely to the contrary. Tehran asserts that its nuclear roadmap is solely for peaceful purposes, such as power generation, scientific research, and medicine. However, the US and Israel dismiss those claims, asserting that Iran is secretly manufacturing atomic weapons. Historically, the international community hoped to resolve this conflict once and for all. In 2015, a nuclear deal known as the JCPOA was signed between Iran, the US, and other leading world powers. Under this agreement, Iran committed to limiting nuclear activity to a maximum uranium enrichment level of 3.67%, sufficient only for civilian use. In return, the economic sanctions imposed on the country would be gradually lifted. However, in 2018, the administration of President Donald Trump decided to unilaterally withdraw from the JCPOA. Since then, Washington has begun implementing a strategy of maximum pressure against Iran. In response, Iran has begun a phased withdrawal from its previous commitments. New rounds of talks have repeatedly stalled as geopolitical tensions rise. Hour after hour, we find ourselves glued to the latest military developments. Yet, we forget that running a country or a factory during such volatile times requires centralized management and the optimization of available resources. As nations vie for nuclear power, manufacturers are facing a similar shift. It is a move from manual control to automation to protect global supply chains. Addressing these challenges, Odoo is launching the Odoo Business Show event series. The focus is on optimizing production through Odoo's automated solutions. This isn't just a seminar, it's a look at an ERP system that unifies all operations. It syncs everything from purchasing and stock to accounting on one platform. These global sessions will take place in major industrial hubs this April. Owners in sectors like textiles, furniture, and food can see a live demo. See firsthand how Odoo improves factory operations with real-time data. Attendees can also get private consultations on budget and productivity. This data-driven approach to production management is completely free. It is a great opportunity to network with the global manufacturing community. The registration link is in the description and the pinned comment. As international debates continue, Iran moves forward with its nuclear program. Uranium enrichment levels have now reached 60% purity. To better understand the level of risk involved, we can use a simple comparison. Enriching uranium is essentially similar to the process of extracting coffee bean essence. Uranium exists in the natural environment in two main isotopic forms. The first is U-238, which makes up the vast majority at about 99.3%. This variant is almost impossible to use in weapons production. Meanwhile, the U-235 isotope accounts for only a small amount, around 0.7%. However, this is an incredibly powerful source of energy storage. Basically, enrichment is the process of filtering out U-238 to concentrate U-235. With concentration levels ranging from 3% to 5%, uranium is typically used to power plants. Once it reaches the 20% threshold, it begins to be applied in medicine or research projects. But if it hits the 60% mark, this material is very close to military grade, and a 90% concentration is the threshold sufficient to produce atomic bombs. Notably, the jump from 0.7% to 20% requires extremely complex engineering. However, once 60% is reached, hitting the 90% mark is only a matter of time. Many international experts believe that Iran is moving very close to this limit. In this upgrade process, Iran has been operating specialized centrifuge systems. Older models like the IR-1 were previously slow and lacked durability. In recent years, thousands of modern IR-6 centrifuges have been put into operation. In fortified bases, located deep inside mountains, these devices operate at superior speeds. This significantly accelerates the process of refining weapons-grade uranium. As a result, the 60% enrichment level is viewed by the United States and Israel as a critical warning signal. These parties believe Iran is using the negotiation process as a tactic to buy more time. They fear that if they wait until uranium reaches the 90% threshold, Tehran will already possess nuclear weapons. This is the primary motivation behind the deployment of preemptive airstrike options. The second key factor lies in the country's arsenal of drones and ballistic missiles. Even without nuclear warheads, Iran maintains one of the most extensive missile systems in the Middle East. The U.S. Department of Defense considers this a particularly serious security threat. This is because U.S. military outposts are densely positioned throughout the entire region. In the early stages of the confrontation, the U.S. even had to deploy B-2 stealth bombers. The objective was to destroy missile silos, built deep underground. This move demonstrates just how seriously Washington views the danger of the situation. It should be noted that the operational mechanism of ballistic missiles differs greatly from conventional ones. Instead of hugging the terrain, they soar into the upper atmosphere, before veering toward their target. The object then plunges toward its destination at an incredibly high velocity. It can be compared to a heavy object being dropped from a skyscraper onto the street below. Even if it is observed falling, intercepting or avoiding it is nearly impossible. Iran has proven its capability to possess multiple missile types, with an operational range of up to 2,000 kilometers. This capability allows them to target almost all U.S. military positions within range. In addition to missiles, Tehran is also ramping up the production of modern military drones. If missiles are likened to direct strikes, these aerial devices are incredibly unpredictable and elusive. These devices are compact, low-cost, and fly at low altitudes, making them extremely difficult for radar to detect. Conventional radar systems focus on high-altitude targets, unlike UAVs which often travel close to the ground. By hiding behind mountain ranges or tall buildings, they often leave air defense networks with no time to react. However, the most daunting challenge is the sheer scale of their numbers. Instead of individual units, Iran deploys dozens or hundreds at once to launch attacks. No matter how advanced the technology, interception systems still have certain saturation points. It's like trying to stop a massive swarm, where a few targets are bound to slip through the net. Furthermore, the production cost of each UAV is extremely low. Each Shahed kamikaze drone costs only about $20,000. Yet, such an inexpensive device is capable of destroying an entire defense system. Radar arrays worth tens of millions of dollars can be threatened by technology Iran provided to Hezbollah, or the Houthis. Washington is particularly concerned about the prospect of pro-Iranian forces opening fire simultaneously. At that point, missiles and UAVs would pour in from everywhere, putting immense pressure on US and Israeli shields. Complexity also increases because Tehran sponsors multiple armed organizations across the region. Prominent groups include Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthi forces in Yemen. Additionally, there is the presence of Shiite militia groups within Iraqi and Syrian territories. These units continuously carry out raids on Israel, as well as United States military outposts. This chain of actions pushes the Middle East into a cycle of prolonged instability. The question is, what gives Iran the confidence to confront the world's leading superpower and its wealthy allies? Analyzing from a military strategic perspective, Iran possesses key advantages to confidently engage in this confrontation. First, let's look at the Strait of Hormuz region. Iran currently controls the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most vital trade routes for global finance. This maritime passage is quite narrow in terms of area. However, it serves as the gateway for approximately 20 to 30% of the world's crude oil supply. The Iranian government holds coordinating authority over a portion of this strait. For years, Tehran has utilized this geographical advantage as a strategic deterrent. Simply by threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz, Iran can cause immediate and extreme volatility in international energy markets. This brings with it the risk of a sudden spike in oil prices. Inflation would then escalate, negatively impacting economic powers in the West and Asia. We can compare the Strait of Hormuz to the main artery of the global economic system. While oil acts as the lifeblood, Iran directly controls that vital vessel. If pressure is applied, the entire world economic system would immediately grind to a halt. When tensions erupted in early March 2026, and Iran began hinting at a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, military leaders from the Revolutionary Guard warned that oil prices could hit $200 per barrel. This threat alone was enough to send global financial markets into a state of extreme anxiety. Iran's second method of exerting pressure is through asymmetric warfare tactics. Tehran is well aware that in a direct confrontation with the United States military, they would struggle to gain the upper hand in air or naval combat. Consequently, over many decades, Iran has focused on a strategy of developing a massive weapons stockpile. This weapon system focuses on weakening and saturating defense systems, particularly ballistic missiles. In addition, the arsenal includes cruise missiles and, most notably, low-cost suicide UAV series. Iran's combat philosophy is straightforward, prioritizing overwhelming quantity over expensive hardware. In standard conflicts, advanced missiles are typically deployed to neutralize corresponding high-tech targets. However, Iran takes a different approach by simultaneously launching hundreds of cheap drones alongside 10 ballistic missiles. Advanced air defense networks like the US Patriot or Israel's Iron Dome still have certain threshold limits. Each defense complex is only capable of monitoring and destroying a specific number of targets at one time. Once the density of aerial objects exceeds processing capacity, the defensive fire net will become overwhelmed. A prime example is the attack on the ASOS airbase that took place in early March 2026. Iran reportedly deployed approximately 200 Shahed 136 units, each costing around $20,000. In contrast, to intercept them, the US military must expend Patriot missiles valued at $3 million to $4 million per unit. If the conflict persists, Washington and its partners will have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars just to counter UAVs. Once the enemy's interceptor inventory thins out, Iran begins deploying high-altitude weapons, like the Fatah II hypersonic missile. Their primary targets are runways or aircraft maintenance hangars. One crucial detail is, Iranian military hardware is not overly dependent on cutting-edge military technological achievements. They are often assembled from common civilian components, available on the open market. From microchips to small engines, many parts can even be ordered directly through global e-commerce platforms. This factor makes efforts to sever Iran's UAV component supply chain extremely difficult. While major powers need months to complete a sophisticated missile system, Iran can churn out hundreds of UAVs per week. These production centers are established in facilities located deep underground. Therefore, Tehran believes it can financially drain its opponents through a long-term war of attrition. Beyond accepting trade losses, the third tool of power is its system of regional strategic partners. It is often assumed that Iran stands alone, but in reality, they are the coordinating hub of an alliance known as the Axis of Resistance. This system brings together armed groups across the Middle East, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Shia militia units. In Iraq and Syria, whenever Iran faces military pressure, these forces activate multiple fronts to spread that pressure thin. This tactic forces the United States and its allies to stretch their resources across various combat zones. Military intervention in Iran could be likened to mindlessly stirring up a hornet's nest. Even if you target the center, a series of satellite units from all sides will immediately emerge to retaliate. For instance, following the U.S. airstrikes in late February 2026, Hezbollah immediately ramped up military pressure on Israel. At the same time, the Houthi group continued to disrupt key maritime shipping routes in the Red Sea. The fourth tool of pressure Iran possesses is the psychological anxiety of neighboring countries. Gulf nations like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar possess incredibly vast financial resources. However, their prosperity rests on two pillars: energy sales and a stable environment to retain investors. The Iranian government understands these vital vulnerabilities of its neighbors very well. Consequently, they frequently warn that any country assisting the U.S. by providing bases for strikes against Iran will find its own territory added to the list of targets for retaliatory attacks. Iran is creating a situation akin to an entity carrying dangerous weapons into a luxury shopping mall. Their message is clear. If attacked, they are prepared to cause mass destruction to the surrounding infrastructure. In that scenario, those holding valuable assets will be forced to speak up and intervene to protect their own interests. The case of the UAE serves as a prime example of this situation. While the United States operates Al Dhafra Air Base here, the UAE also serves as a major regional hub for tourism and finance. In cities like Dubai or Abu Dhabi, the mere presence of a few drones near their airspace could cause the Dubai stock market to collapse instantly, leading to a sharp spike in maritime insurance premiums. As travelers start canceling their plans, Gulf nations often find they must carefully weigh the risks before deepening their involvement in conflicts. Reports from early 2026 even suggest the UAE informed the U.S. that American fighters are prohibited from launching strikes against Iran from Al Dhafra. The facility is strictly reserved for defensive operations or aircraft refueling purposes. Furthermore, Dubai is currently in the middle of extensive preparations for the 2030 World Cup. They require a peaceful climate to develop infrastructure, promote global tourism, and attract foreign capital, rather than regional instability. Should the Middle East escalate into a massive combat zone, their entire strategic vision would face severe disruption. Consequently, despite Iran's confrontations with various nations, the geopolitical landscape remains incredibly complex. Beyond simply counting combatants on a map, how might global markets and international trade be impacted if the fighting intensifies? Let's examine the potential consequences in more detail. Initially, the global economy would face significant pressure from rising fuel and commodity prices. World oil prices would surge immediately if shipping through the Strait of Hormuz were ever compromised. Many nations extract petroleum but still require heavy crude imports to keep their domestic refineries operational. A rise in global crude costs inevitably puts upward pressure on domestic gas prices. Higher fuel costs drive up logistics expenses, which in turn increases the retail price of almost every consumer good. Imagine if the price of premium gasoline jumped from its current levels by a massive 50 or 60% per liter. The cost of transporting a shipping container across major trade routes could rise by hundreds of dollars per trip. Ultimately, when operational costs climb, it is the end consumers who must shoulder the financial burden. Isn't it obvious? Everything from food to daily necessities could see price hikes due to rising fuel costs. The next factor is the sharp decline in exporters' profits, caused by maritime shipping costs. As the conflict escalates, trade routes through the Red Sea and surrounding areas face greater dangers. Ships are forced to divert their routes to ensure safety, which means taking the long way around. Rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope extends transit times, consumes more fuel, and drives up insurance premiums. Delays of 10 to 15 days are inevitable, leading to constant fluctuations in freight rates. Consumer goods manufacturers exporting to Europe or the U.S. East Coast will be directly affected by these price increases. The third issue lies in the exchange rate pressure on local currencies. During periods of instability, international investors tend to withdraw capital from high-risk asset portfolios. They prioritize seeking safe havens, where the USD is always the top choice. Consequently, a rising USD exerts significant pressure, causing other currencies to weaken. When the local currency depreciates, the cost of importing production supplies becomes much more expensive. Typical items include technical equipment, components, and raw material inputs. Suppose a business needs to pay for shipments of electronic components in dollars. If the exchange rate fluctuates upwards by about 6% compared to before, then every $1 million worth of imported goods will incur a massive cost discrepancy. For many business entities, this deficit is not just a minor setback, but a genuine financial shock that threatens the very survival of the enterprise. Fourth, the pace of global exports risks slowing down if the world economy falls into stagnation. The United States and the European Union are key consumption markets for international trade. When they are caught up in instability or inflationary pressures from rising energy costs, customers will begin to scale back their spending. They will prioritize cutting out items that aren't strictly essential, such as the latest smartphones, furniture, or household electronics. Demand for certain exported food products is also at risk of declining. Many American households might delay upgrading their phones to pay for gas, along with heating costs and a variety of other utility bills. If order volumes drop, major industrial manufacturing hubs will be forced to readjust their entire operational processes. The number of shifts will be cut, leading to a necessary reduction in staff. Fifth, as gold prices climb, a herd mentality triggers a shift in capital flows. Many investors habitually hoard gold, especially during global volatility. If conflicts persist, world gold usually becomes the preferred safe haven. The precious metals market sometimes overheats due to psychological impact and scarcity. Actual data and market analysis reports all indicate that international gold prices keep hitting peaks, driving trading prices in other regions to record highs. In this context, people will withdraw their savings to flock toward buying gold. Capital will leave the banking system, stagnating production and commercial activities. The market gradually becomes unbalanced, while speculative channels like stocks or crypto tend to be sold off due to volatility fears, driving cash flows back to gold and the USD. Furthermore, it's the psychological feedback loop that will make the situation even more tense. In general, Middle Eastern conflicts do not cause direct physical damage to other nations. However, they have the potential to drive up fuel prices, increase logistics costs, and pressure foreign exchange rates. This dampens export activities and unsettles investor sentiment. All these factors directly impact the income and employment of the general public. As of early March 2026, the confrontations are still unfolding with extreme intensity. I truly hope this situation doesn't drag on, and not just for humanitarian reasons. The reality is that the longer the conflict persists, the more severe the global economic downturn becomes. Currently, social media is flooded with images of people living and working in that region. Their lives have been upended, flights are grounded, and work faces many obstacles due to the hostilities. From a pragmatic standpoint, those holding strong currencies or precious metals, or those trading commodities like oil, might actually anticipate this volatility, simply because the value of the assets they own will have a chance to skyrocket. Nonetheless, that is just the investor's perspective. For the vast majority, prolonged instability is rarely a good sign, as stability is the foundation for doing business and planning for the future. If there is any hope, we wish for tensions to ease soon and for peace to be restored, so that financial markets can recover sustainably, shielding people's lives from the fallout of distant wars. Thank you very much for watching. I am your host. Remember to subscribe to the channel for the latest videos. Goodbye and see you again.